Hello, welcome to another episode of The Heart Chamber. I am your host, Boots Knighton. On the program today, I have Lisa Mihan. Lisa is 57 years old from New England and underwent a myectomy at NYU Langone. She is an incredible heart warrior with a cautionary tale to tell. I hope you'll join me for the whole episode today. And I'd also like to thank you for tuning in. If you are able, I'd appreciate you making a donation to keep this podcast on the air. You can go to theheartchamberpodcast.com and click the donate link. Also, if you have a story you want to share on the Heart Chamber, I'd love to hear from you. You can either drop me an email, boots@theheartchamberpodcast.com, or you can go to the contact link on my website. Let's get to it. Lisa, thank you for coming on to the Heart Chamber today. And you reached out to me. You feel like it's so important to share your story. And I'm so honored that you wanted to take a little bit of your time to come on to the podcast to share with listeners. So let's just dive into your story.
Okay, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, yeah, where shall we begin?
Well, I'm 57 years old, and I would say probably 15 years ago, I started having some strange symptoms. I live in a small New England town, and I do a lot of outdoorsy activities, hiking, tennis, just skiing. And I started to notice on and off, like being out of breath for not doing very much, sometimes just even walking to my car. And other times I could go on a hike in the mountains and have no problems whatsoever. And this went on for many years, and I would get heart palpitations and sometimes some chest pain, but nothing alarming enough to call an ambulance. But it's like, oh, just something doesn't feel right. But then I would stop walking or stop skiing, kind of catch my breath, and then go on, and it would sort of go away. And this went on for on and off, as I said, for years. And one time I was walking, this is just like 5 years ago, I would say, I was walking up the basement steps carrying laundry basket, and my husband noticed I was out of breath. And he said, "Are you out of breath?" It's like, "Oh my God, yeah, I think I am. That's so weird. I'm a healthy person, I'm active." And I thought, "Oh gosh, I gotta, get this checked out." And my heart was palpitating a lot, but it had been like that for so long. It's sort of felt normal. And it was insidious and it was slow moving. So I didn't want to deal with it. So a lot of times I just put it out of my mind actively, like, "Oh, no, I'm too busy. I'm too tired. I'm not going to think about this right now." And then it would go away for months. So I was able to forget about it. And then it would come back. So, went to my GP, and I ended up at a cardiologist's office. And my GP wanted to know more. I have, they did the EKG, and my heartbeat is strange, but the GP said to me, that everybody's heartbeat, it's like a fingerprint, and everybody's is different, and yours is quite different, but doesn't look alarming to me, but sent me on to a cardiologist. And I went to a female cardiologist because I'd heard so much and read so much about, cardiologists dismissing women's symptoms. I thought if I had went to a female that would be less likely to happen. So I went to her, and she did the echo and the EKG and all of that and stress test, and said, basically, there's nothing wrong with you. And I said, well, what about these palpitations? And what about, getting out of breath? And she said, I think you have exercise induced asthma, and gave me, prescription for inhalers, which actually made me feel much worse when I took them and made my heart palpitate. And turns out, in retrospect, that was actually dangerous, but didn't know that at the time. And she said to me, it can't be your heart, because if you have blockages, they're always there. So your symptoms wouldn't be intermittent. So since you have intermittent symptoms, it can't be your heart. Okay. So, and she said, I think you're too stressed out. And I think that you really need to relax. And, maybe you should think about what's going on in your life. And I tried to explain that, things were good and I wasn't particularly stressed out. But she's like, no, I think that palpitations are from stress. So left there, I kind of heard what I wanted to hear, which is that there was nothing wrong. Continued to live my life. But then in the last, so I guess about 2 years ago, things got bad very fast, all of a sudden. So over these years, I would sort of hide it from myself, even. I would go for a walk in a town with my friends, nothing strenuous. And I would have to stop, but I would pretend to look in a window, or I would look at the view, stop and look at the view, or take a photograph. And I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I couldn't keep up with them, even though I'm in good shape or felt like I am in good shape. And I actually realized in retrospect, I was hiding it from myself as well, like how poorly I was doing and that I was really unable to physically keep up. So I hid that so well, even from my husband and friends that I walked with almost every day. They didn't know. So anyway, all of a sudden things started to go downhill quickly. And my husband and I were in Savannah, Georgia, and we were walking a lot. It's very flat there. And we were walking, 4 or 5 miles, no problem. And then one day I couldn't walk really at all. And I was getting chest pains and I was walking like an 85-year-old person with arthritis. I was walking so slowly because I was getting chest pain, but it wasn't alarming. It didn't feel like a heart attack, but I knew something was really, really wrong. And I didn't want to go to the hospital down there, and we were leaving in a couple of days. So I stopped doing any walking and stayed flat, and we drove back home. And I went to my GP, who has an EKG in his office. I said, I feel like something's wrong. He looked and he said, this looks okay to me, but go home. I'm going to send it to a friend. So he sent it to a cardiologist friend. 15 minutes later, my phone rang and he said, Lisa, can you get to the emergency room? And he said, and I don't want you to go to the local hospital. I want you to go to the big hospital, like 45 minutes away. And I said, oh my God, my husband's not here, but he's coming back in 20 minutes. And he said, well, if he's not back in 20 minutes, I want you to call 911. And he said, and I don't want you to walk up any stairs or anything. He said, and don't panic.
Yeah, right.
Of course, you
Mhm,
you panicked. It was
mhm.
not what I was expecting. And anyway, my husband got home, we drove in, and this was during COVID. So walk into the last thing you wanna do is walk into an emergency room during COVID and people everywhere, and
Mhm.
it was not a good time to be there. But in any case, they admitted me because my troponin levels were raised. And they said to me, "You're probably having a small heart attack and you're gonna stay over tonight, and tomorrow you're probably gonna get a stent." So I was like, "Oh, damn, okay." So stayed over, went in for the angiogram the next day, and they found nothing. There were no blockages. So this doctor who the female doctor who had sort of told me it would felt like my fault for being too nervous, too uptight or whatever. She came in and saw me. She said, "I'm really surprised to see you here. I didn't think this was gonna happen to you." Anyway, to her credit, later, once I was in the hospital, she didn't let me go. A lot of people like hearing stories about raised troponin levels. They can't find anything, and you're gone. They let you out the next day. But to her credit, she kept me in, and I ended up doing every test known to man, including the cardiac MRI, which is where they found after 3 days. That was the last test because they couldn't find anything up until then, which is where they found the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which is an inherited, mostly inherited. They said 97% chance that it's inherited. It's the most common form of inherited heart disease. So to her credit again, she said, this is sort of like beyond my scope and don't really have too many patients with this. So she sent me on to a heart muscle specialist who then sent me on to a specialty clinic. And they had said there are three in the US centers of excellence, and it's NYU Langone, Cleveland Clinic, and Mayo Clinic. And I had lived in New York 25 years, and New York is my home. So ended up going there in the end.
Wow. Wow. So I'm just thinking about you in the hospital, and you've been dealing with this for several years already, 3 at the time, and they tell you all this, you end up so once they do release you from the hospital and say you need to go elsewhere, where did that leave you?
So, interestingly, when they told me the diagnosis, I didn't really know what it meant, but I sobbed because I was so happy to have a diagnosis. And all those years that I had beaten myself up, saying to myself, like, you're not in good shape, like, compared to your friends. Like, even though you do the same things every day as they do and you're active, you just must be in terrible shape. And, all the stories that I told myself to explain why I had these problems, or that, the things that I like to do, which was like eat early, because when I ate later, it really bothered my heart. I would sometimes have palpitations for 4 hours. If I went to bed full, palpitations for 4 hours, where you can't sleep and you try to sit up, you try to roll out, you can't get comfortable, and certainly can't sleep when I could actually see my heartbeat on my clothes. It was beating so hard. So I used to get made fun of, like, lightheartedly by people in my life about wanting to eat at the, blue-haired special at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when they wanted to go out at 7:30 or 8. And I always thought that was just what I liked, but really there was a reason behind it, and it felt really good to have a reason. So I was super relieved, and then when I did some research on it, I knew I had a long road ahead trying to figure this out. As of now, it does not look genetic, and my parents don't seem to have it. Knock wood, my children don't seem to have it. My brothers don't seem to have it. And I'm super grateful. And I'm hoping I'm just in that 3%, that there was just a fluke of birth, and that's why I have it. So, anyway, they call it HCM, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy clinics at these centers of excellence, these 3 hospitals. And they have just specialists. You have to have the HCM diagnosis to see them. You can't just suspect you have it. So, HCM is it's a thickening of the septum in your heart, and your heart is working too hard, it beats too hard, and so it has trouble relaxing, and so that it inhibits the blood flow, and the pressures in the heart are extreme, and the pressures that build because the heart's beating so hard end up sometimes distorting the shape of the heart and distort the mitral valves. And so, like, my having 56 years of this, my mitral valves were too stretched out to function properly. And that's what was causing all the symptoms. So the blood sort of gets stuck in the heart. And I just want to go back for a second. The one really frustrating thing was when I ended up going to the Dr. Massera, who at NYU Langone, who I can't say enough about. Like, what an unbelievable doctor, clinician, detective person he is. I can't say enough about him, and I'm so happy I chose to go to NYU Langone.
And how do you spell his last
Anyway, for
name?
the first Massera.
Okay.
Daniel is his first name with a E on the end.
Mhm.
He's a young guy,
Mhm.
and this is all he does is see HCM patients. But when I was sitting in his waiting room, there was a poster, like in doctor's offices, they have the posters that say list of symptoms. It was a list of all the symptoms that I was telling my cardiologist that I had. And there's a poster there. Like, if she had had that poster in her office, I would have said, that's what I have. But she'd really barely heard of it. So that was sort of surprising to me. I shouldn't say she didn't hear of it, because that's assuming something I don't know, but she wasn't familiar with it. Just say. I don't want to be unfair. But anyway, seeing that poster was like, oh, wow. Like, I'm so surprised this took so long for anyone to figure out when it's just right there. So, anyway, went in to see him, and NYU has a special way that they do echoes for people who have HCM, and it shows symptoms that regular echoes do not, if you have them. And so that showed up there where it hadn't showed up on echoes that I had done elsewhere. So I had the obstructive kind of HCM, which 70% of HCM patients have. Um, and in a way, it's better to have the obstructive kind because they can operate. If you have the non obstructive kind, there's really nothing they can do. So I was sort of saying a prayer that I had the obstructive kind, even though that causes a lot of, nasty symptoms and can kill you. It's all hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is also when you're young in your 20s, it's that issue that you hear about where a 20-year-old soccer player just drops dead on the field, or a football player. It's usually that. And it was an undiagnosed heart condition. That's what it is.
Wow, that's intense. And I'm just thinking about, every heart person I've spoken to, it's amazing how long it takes to get help. That just
Yes.
continues to be the theme throughout almost every single conversation I've had, unless it is just so obvious and emergent. And it sounds like this
Yeah.
is really can be hard to pin down.
Right. It's true. I apparently my thickening was not that extreme, and that people would see on an echo. This doctor had said to me, "There's a little thickening, but that's what happens with age, so don't worry about it." The first one that I had seen, and so if it's happening with age, what can you do? I didn't really give it another thought again, but through the NYU's tests, they were able to see more.
Okay.
So, I mean, they're really I just can't say enough. I can't say enough, and they don't come up in the conversation, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, that I've seen that much. It's more Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, but I am so grateful I ended up at NYU Langone. Like, I I just I feel like I know they saved my
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
because I would have been homebound by now. I would have not been able to walk across the driveway
Mm.
without getting out of breath, having to stop. It was getting just everyday living was getting too difficult to do. And, not I'm not elderly and I'm in shape, and it's like was a shock that this was happening to me. I was just so grateful that there was something that could do about it. NYU, they started me on drugs. That's sort of like the first line of defense to see if that works. And then the drugs are aimed at reducing the intensity of the heartbeat. And
Do you remember what those medications were?
they did, yeah, Norpace, Norpace. But then the side effects were really terrible. And so then they give you other drugs to counteract the side effects. And then those have side effects. And it was kind of awful. I did feel like it helped me a little bit. It helped the palpitations, but they were able to do an echo 3 months later, or 6, I can't remember actually if it was 3 months or 6 months later. And they did testing and they could see that the drugs weren't doing enough, that they weren't really working at all. I thought they were working a little, but they said they're not working at all. And so at that point they said the only thing to do is a myectomy, which is the open heart surgery where they shave the septum down, they shave the muscle that's overgrown, and they usually have to fix valves at the same time.
Mhm.
So they did a mitral valve clip on me, and
And what does that mean,
yeah,
mitral
so
valve clip?
they have to shorten and tighten the mitral valve so that it fits properly again. The fact that it was too long and floppy, it was sort of stopping the blood from leaving the heart properly. And so I'm so grateful. My surgeon's name is Dr. Swistel. It's Swistel. And also, I can't say it. And there was a chance, small chance that I could lose my valve and end up with either a, tissue valve or a mechanical valve. We had that conversation. He said, I think I can save your valve. I think, and he did. And I'm so eternally grateful for that. And he's so skilled. And I just rave about my care there and the doctors. And, people always laugh about heart surgeons thinking they're gods, but I actually think he is one. So, he saved my life.
Mhm.
And I'm just beyond grateful because now I feel 20 years younger than I did 2 years ago, and I can do anything. They don't want you to become a marathon runner. They don't want you to do physical training that super intense, no triathlons, but I didn't like that anyway, so it's fine. But I can do everything I wanted to do before.
That's
And I can
incredible.
ski and play tennis and hike, and I still don't like very long vertical hikes. It's too much, but I just listen to my body and it's okay.
That is incredible. Walk me through the timeline. So they did the echocardiogram to see if the medications were working. They weren't. Can you walk us through that timeline then of, like, getting to surgery,
Yeah,
scheduling it, and then also how long were you in the hospital, and then what your rehab
sure.
was like?
Sure. So once he told me there was nothing to do but the myectomy. That's a lot to take in. He said you got to go home, think about it. He said, "Look, this is not cancer surgery." He said, "When you have cancer, you have to have surgery or you're going to die." He said, "You aren't going to die from this anytime soon." He said, "But your quality of life will continue to basically go down the
Mhm,
toilet." He didn't say that, but that's
mhm.
what he meant.
Which makes you feel like
Um
you want to die,
and
right?
he
Because
said,
if you
"So."
can't breathe and you can't
Right.
function, it's like, why bother living?
Exactly.
I've been there, I understand.
Exactly. You can't do the things right, I know, listening to your story, I
Mhm,
know you know. You can't do the things you love to do, let alone it started to get so bad, like I said, like, walking to the car got difficult. So, I didn't wanna hold my husband back, my friends, my kids, like, I didn't wanna be unable to live a normal life, even a restricted normal life I would have accepted, but this was beyond restricted. So, anyway, it sort of felt like a non-choice. Luckily, I had good health insurance, so I didn't have to worry about that. And I think it took me about 2 days to decide, yeah, I have no choice. And the funny thing is I never cried about it. I never got in bed and felt depressed or cried about it. I was just like, okay, I am entering the medical system. I'm just going to be the leaf in the stream. I'm going to let them take me. These guys are the specialists, and it's going to take me where I need to go. And I really put my trust in them. And luckily, it worked well for me. And I was super thrilled about that. So it took, I don't know, about 2.5 months to get scheduled. I could have done it earlier, but it was around the holidays, and I wanted to get through the holidays and then do it. So it could have been sooner, but I needed to wrap my head around it and kinda get ready. I don't know if you felt that same kind of thing.
I can speak to that real quick. In hindsight, I'm really glad I had as much time as I did, which was about oh gosh, hold on. I gotta do some quick calculus here. It was 4 months once my heart surgery was scheduled. I had to wait 4 months because of my crazy story, which listeners, if you're just tuning in and haven't heard my story, go back to
Y
episode 1 'cause
No, I heard your
yeah,
story.
I know you did, but our listeners,
Yeah, oh,
it's
other
cray
people, sorry,
cray
yeah.
because I too had to deal during COVID, so it took a while. And
Yep,
at the time, I
yep,
was not okay with waiting, but what it did, like, to
yep,
use your words, it helped me wrap my head around things because I went from
yeah,
being an athlete to not really fast, and I think having that piece of well, it's a practice really of radical acceptance every day, like having to be in a beginner's mind every day of all of a sudden, I am not okay. I am not who I thought I
mhm,
was in my heart, like
yeah,
physical heart. And I
right,
had to do a lot of work with my therapist to mentally prep for heart surgery. And I think that was
yeah,
why I came out of it so well.
yes,
Well, I was just going to say, unless it's emergent, like I think it is
yeah,
prudent to wait because you gotta calm your nervous system down because if you go in with a jacked nervous system, that can throw all kinds of things out of whack. And there
right,
really is there's this phrase I've been hearing from a variety of friends lately from just for various reasons, but it's like you have to go slow to go fast.
mm, that's wise, yeah, it's true, it's true. I did find that weight difficult because it's always sort of hanging over your head. I'm sure you felt the
Oh, it
same.
sucked.
Sometimes you're like having fun with your friends and then you go to bed that night and like, oh my God, in 3 weeks I have this to do this scary thing.
Mhm.
But like I said, I never cried about it, which I'm surprised about because it's a big deal. And I would have cried had they not been able to do anything. But because they could do something, I just wanted it done, really. I wanted to feel better, and I was willing to climb that mountain to do it. And I'm so grateful that I was brave enough to do it, really. So I hate needles. I'm scared of pain. Like that question, what are you most afraid of in life? Other than the obvious losing people you love and things like that. What are you most afraid of in life? And my answer was always pain and like physical pain. And that I had to do this is kind of ironic. But I feel like a much stronger person, and now I never thought of myself as brave before, but now I think of myself as brave.
Very brave. Mhm. Very brave. So,
So,
how long were you in the hospital for? Walk us through that part.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so it was during COVID. So my best laid plans of spending the holidays with my kids and who are grown up, kids and family and brothers and husband and all that was a terrible idea because I couldn't get sick. I couldn't get, as if they told me if I lost my date, if I got COVID, that they couldn't see me till April, and I just couldn't wait another things were getting really bad, as I said, and I like emotionally would not have been able to wait. All right, I would have if I had to, but I really didn't want to. And so anyway, after Thanksgiving, I shut it all down, not knowing that was going to happen. I didn't plan it very well, but I started to get worried about seeing people because I couldn't be sick. And, that was sort of like the Omicron was coming out and everybody was getting sick right before Christmas of that year. So I had to be super careful. And in retrospect, maybe going before Christmas might have been a better idea, but doesn't matter.
Mm.
It didn't matter in the end. So NYU, you go in that day. They were amazing. Nurses were amazing. I had a hard time. They wanted me to walk into the operating room. I don't know if you had that. I felt that was like somehow bothering me. I they said people do better who walk in on their own instead of going in a wheelchair, and
Hmm.
I don't know, it just felt really weird to walk into the OR, but I did it, and, they offered me a wheelchair, and then it came, and I was like, "Oh, this is stupid stuff." I I just walked in, and it's so weird to climb up on that very cold table, and there are, like, what, 20 people in there about,
And is it
and just for
the
you.
table is very narrow.
It is
I remember
narrow.
that very well. I'm like, there is just enough space for
Yeah.
me on yeah, I'm like, "What do bigger people
I think
do?"
it's like I exactly, I'm a small person as well, and I think it's like 14 inches wide.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
like,
know.
it was the size of a postage stamp, but okay.
Exactly. I don't know, maybe they have different size tables for different size people, I don't know, but, I was surprised by that as well, and, like, how cold it was in there and how many people were in there. And,
Did you read your
that
operating
was
report?
no, my husband did. I had a hard time with those reports because they were coming in before could speak to the doctors. I was not reading anything when I was in the hospital, but afterwards, when all the test results come through that portal, and every single page said heart failure, heart failure, heart failure. And I thought, like, oh my God, like I thought I was better. It sounds like I'm dying. And that it scared me so much every time I read it. I just stopped reading it, and I waited to go into the doctor, and it that's not me. I'm not normally like that. I like to be in control of the information, but it was just too alarming what I was reading, and I didn't know how to put it in context and how to interpret it.
Mhm.
So I stopped reading those, but I did not read my report. Kind of don't want to.
Yeah,
Not
it's not for the faint of
sure I can
heart.
explain why.
Pun totally intended. It really is not for the faint of heart, and because I am such a curious mind, I couldn't help myself, and I will only share one thing because I don't wanna traumatize you or the listeners. Just to speak to the cold room, that is so
Yep.
intentional, and they chilled my body down to like, I think 93 or 92 degrees. And I don't know all the reasons behind that. That's for a future podcast. I plan on interviewing healthcare providers, but they and then I underwent a rewarming, which you likely did too. And so, yeah, they keep all the rooms so cold. The heart cath lab is so cold. And then, yeah, the OR is so cold, and it's all for very specific reasons. So, but
Mhm.
I very much remember how cold the OR was and that narrow postage stamp of a table.
Yeah. Well, the good news is we don't remember getting chilled or warmed
Right,
or any of
exactly,
that, right?
exactly.
So that's the good news for anyone listening is
Were
you're not aware.
were you put on a heart-lung
And I
machine?
yes. Yeah, and I know it was a 3.5-hour operation, and they had to cut the septum of the heart, so in the center of the heart, so they go through the opening that the valve is in, and I know it's done blind. I believe it's done blind that they sort of feel their way, which is kind of amazing. I'm not exactly sure how that works or if I'm even correct in that, but I heard that at some point, and it stuck in my head. So the recovery was pretty straightforward. I was in 6 days. I did have they wanted to let me out on day 4, but I got AFib, and because with the myectomy, when they're shaving the center of your heart, they often cut into they can't see it, where your electrical impulses, the nerves are, and some people are closer to the surface, some are deeper, and oftentimes they will cut into that, and so the right side of the heart takes over, and sometimes people need pacemakers. Luckily, I did not, but so they cut into the electrical system, and the heart starts freaking out.
Mhm,
And it's usually on day 3 that you get post-op AFib, and they give you all kinds of really scary medication to stop that. And so they had to keep me for 3 days because you know how you hear your heart monitor when you're in there, right? And it starts going, it builds up, it's going beep, 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 and it's getting faster and faster. And more people are like running in to the room. And that was not fun. And that was actually really hard for me emotionally because I had read that myectomy patients feel better right away, that the what you know, this now that everything fits properly, their heart beats better and that they feel better right away. Well, I did not feel better right away. And then I started having AFib, which is really uncomfortable and scary. And I thought, what the hell did I do to myself? Like, oh my God, this is not what I signed up for. Apparently Dr. Massera told me about it, but I just didn't remember it, that that was a possibility. And I had to stay on drugs for a couple of months after the surgery to keep that at bay. And luckily, things have been good since then. But it can be sort of a side effect of this operation that people might have to deal with AFib, and especially post op. So 6 days I went home. I thought that first week was the scariest week of my life being home. I don't know if you felt that as well. You feel so exhausted. You lose a lot of blood. Apparently, I would have been eligible for a transfusion, but it was during COVID and they didn't have enough blood, so that the threshold of getting the blood was higher and I didn't meet that next threshold. So, I had lost a lot of blood, and I think that contributed to the weakness and exhaustion. Like, just stand taking a shower, which you really want to do after being in the hospital for 6 days. My legs were shaking so badly that I could barely stand there to take the shower. I was so weak. And your heart, I'm having the AFib and the incision and the, sternum, and everything hurts, and you're just afraid. I found myself to be really scared in that first week. I did not want to go back to the hospital. I was like, my goal was not to go back there. No more IVs, please. And, I did not end up going back, but that first week was scary. And the second week, slightly better. Every week is slightly better. It feels super slow when you're going through it. Like, because every day's the same. I didn't have the bandwidth to read. I couldn't even read a newspaper. I was so tired, and like mentally. My husband told friends and family, please don't text her, because I was feeling stressed that I wasn't answering people. I couldn't, I just, all I wanted to do was kind of sit there. And the only thing I couldn't watch any TV that had a plot, couldn't really follow it. not enough energy to be interested. So I'd watch like the Great British Bake Off and, shows that were super easy and you didn't have to exert any energy to follow. And by week 3, I was walking a mile, but I had to break it into 2 parts. My heart hurt after the mile, and I called them and I said, "I can do it," because they said they wanted me to be doing this, that I can walk the mile. It was January, so it was cold outside, which wasn't ideal. And they suggested, instead of doing it all at once, that I do half in the morning and then half in the afternoon, and that really helped me a lot. And every day I tried to do a little more, bought an Apple Watch, really tracked how far I was going, tracked my heart rate, stuff like that. I did not find the sternotomy that bad. I never had a broken bone in my life, so I was really worried about that. It hurts, certainly hurts, but I didn't think that was that bad, surprisingly. And unlike you, I have not had trouble with my sternal wires. So I'm grateful for that. I'm a petite person too, and somehow I escaped. I think I would know by now. It's been like a year and a quarter since,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, I think you're good by now. I swear they can be used to mend wire fences, like chain link fences. They're so thick and
Yeah,
big.
when you said that, I was so surprised when you said that, because you would think you could feel it, but like on your skin, but you really can't.
It's
Incredible.
yeah, I won the medical lottery, what can I
And
say?
that they missed a piece.
Like I said, I won the lottery.
Y I know.
Wow,
I don't understand how they put it in that bag for you and didn't notice a piece was missing, but you noticed a piece was missing.
that was a hard moment.
I cannot I can't even imagine how stunned you were when you saw that. And how they missed it.
Mhm. Yeah, like I said, this has been my greatest teacher, this whole experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, but back to you. So you were breaking the mile up into 2. When could you link a mile
Mhm.
together and feel like, "Oh, man, I'm gonna be okay?"
A month. At a month.
Okay.
So by week 3, so that seems like week 3, and it's only a week later. It sounds kind of ridiculous in saying it now, but it's monumental in the time and the difference between how I felt at week 2 and week 4 was I started to, as you said, think, "Oh my gosh, I think I'm actually might be okay, and I might be feeling better." My heart really hurt, and I had some pericarditis after the operation, just like swelling, heart swelling from everything that they did, and that was way worse for me than the sternotomy and all the rest of it. So, and that was scary too, because I just wanted to stop thinking about my heart for a change. I've been thinking about it for 2.5 years at that point, like every day, all the time. It's like, please leave me alone. I just want to have a day where I don't think about my heart. It's not that fun to be obsessed with your heart.
Mm-mm. No, and I say to people when they ask, like, "What is this like?" And I say, "Well, do you think about your spleen?" And people look at me funny and like, "Well, no." And as most of us think about our stomachs because it lets us know when it's empty, right? We need to eat. But most of the time,
Right.
that's the only organ we really consider. Oh, that and our bladder and our intestines because we have to empty those.
Right.
So, but the rest, we just
Right.
take them for granted because they just quietly do their jobs, and we hopefully take good care of our bodies
Right.
so that we're taking good care of all the organs, right? And
Right.
so it is I hear you, like, it is such a privilege when I have a day I don't have to think about my heart.
It's incredible, isn't it? And it's such a it feels like such a gift to be in the place where you don't have to think about it, or it's not making you think about it. And it's just such a bad place to be so internal like that,
Mhm,
I think, emotionally and for everyone around you, and because you can't be present in the rest of your life when you're thinking, is this like the end? Is this the last breath? Is my heart going to actually explode, because it feels like it might.
mhm.
So it's such a gift. And even now, little more than a year later, some days I'll get in bed at night and sort of almost like automatically expect my heart's gonna palpitate, and I lie there and I think, "Oh my god," I don't that's over. I almost still can't believe it.
So how do
The
you
HCM is not cured. It's not you have it forever. It's the way the cells in the heart are aligned from birth, and you can't fix that, but what's fixed is the problem, the obstruction that was causing most of the symptoms. You have to be careful not to get dehydrated because I can get palpitations again, things like that, but that's easy, right?
Mhm.
Just have to remind yourself.
Question about that. Okay, so if you can't get rid of the HCM, can it cause another obstruction down the road?
So apparently, heart muscle doesn't grow back, which is why if someone has a heart attack and it kills off some muscle, they have a weaker heart
Ah,
because of
right.
that.
Okay.
So they said if I was really if I had been 17 and having this, that there's a small possibility that over the course of one's life it could grow back, but not me. I'm
Okay.
too old.
Okay.
So I actually have to take blood pressure medication. I don't have high blood pressure, but they don't want my heart to work too hard because they don't want the valves to stretch out again. So I just take, and luckily I have no side effects from it. And it's easy, one pill a day, fine, doesn't bother me at all. So, well, very happy to do that. And
Wow.
to go from, I don't know, I had two like those kid sandwich bags, the brown paper bags for sandwiches when you're a kid, two of those filled with medications from before and then at the hospital. And at about 3 months, I went off of everything except the blood pressure pill. And it was the most cathartic experience to put those in the two brown bags and the police station. You take old medication to the police station and I think they burn it. And to put those into that little red box and say goodbye and close that door, it was like, I'll never forget that day. It just felt so freeing and so good.
I just hear a sense of hope. Like I I'm gonna live. I'm okay. We're moving forward. It's all in the
Right,
rear view mirror.
right.
So what is your life like now? Like, do you have to go to NYU for yearly visits?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I at my fir it's yearly from the time they release you, which was last April, so I'm going shortly.
Okay.
Uh, so when you get out from the surgery, I had to have a 2-week visit, a month visit, and then at 3 months. And then after the 3-month visit, they do another echo and things look good. They'll, release you to come back every year. And that's what's next for me. I'm always a little nervous going in because before, every time I went to them, I got worse and worse news about my situation. So I know I'm going to be nervous, although feel, I feel really good. And yeah, so supposedly that's the plan is to go every year forever. And they will take your kids into their care at the with Dr. Macera, even if they are not they haven't been diagnosed, but because it's hereditary, they want to sort of keep an eye on them. And that's incredible because they don't have to go through, God forbid they have it, but if they do, they can bypass all of the being told there's nothing wrong with you, gaslighting, you know, experience that most other heart patients experience. So I'm grateful for that. They know what symptoms to look out for, things like that. Yeah, so my life, like I said, I literally feel 20 years younger than I did. I can do anything I play tennis 3 times a week. I cross country ski, I downhill ski. I go for 5-mile walks without any issues. Like I said, I still don't really like big, like what you were doing with the big mountain hikes. It's too much, but it always has been. It so I was a sprinter in high school. I was on the track team and I was a sprinter. I used to hide in the bushes for the long distance runs. And I always thought that I just hated those, but there was a reason I hated them. I just didn't know.
Mhm. Wow. Such a incredible story of tenacity and wisdom and hope and healing. Any parting words of advice to fellow HCM patients?
I would say if you are eligible for this surgery, I'm a proponent. even if my results were half as good as they are, I would have said it was worth it. And it's a really tough month, and it's also an emotional recovery, which I read a little bit about when I was researching other people's experiences online. I read about other people's emotional struggles, and I thought, oh, it's not going to happen to me because luckily I have not had to suffer with depression in my life or anything like that. So and also this surgery was a choice, that it wasn't like one day I went in with chest pains and the next day I had a triple bypass. That's jarring. This was planned and my choice, and I felt like, well, I'm going to escape the emotional difficulties, and it was a lot harder than I thought. And I still am not entirely sure why it's so emotional and why it's so difficult. The only thing I thought of is it really, and I don't know if you had this experience, that it feels like perhaps your soul lives in there, like near your heart, in your heart, and that they are cutting in there and, poking and prodding and cutting, doing what they need to do. And I feel like your soul, as how I've described it to my friends and family, is like a clam, and it gets jostled and it closes up. And it takes time, and everybody's different, for the clam to relax and open up again. And for me, I would say it was about 3 weeks, which isn't too terrible, but it was a hard 3 weeks. And I would say to expect, if anybody's going to do this or thinking about doing this, that to have as good a support network as you can. The only I didn't really wanna see people, I had no energy to see people, but, my husband was amazing, took unbelievable care of me, and, I knew people were right outside the metaphorical door, and as soon as I was ready, they were gonna be there, and my kids and all of that. So, that was nice to know that everybody was there, even though I didn't have the energy to see them or talk to them at the time. But I just say to expect a little some that it to be hard, and not just physically. And I still don't understand why it is like that. But I've not heard that about other surgeries, just this one.
And every heart warrior I've spoken with reports the same, not in your words. That's a new way of hearing it, which I so appreciate. My surgeon spoke to me the day before my surgery and said, "You might get sad." And that it was often that he saw depression, and they call it a cardiac depression. And
Hmm.
I I wrote in my journal while I was still in the hospital that the depression had set in, but that's all I wrote. It was on, like,
Yeah.
I think it was day 3. Yeah, it was day 3. I don't know what was happening, I don't know why, like I said, I didn't put any other details, and I went through an emotional roller coaster as well, and it's enough in the rear view now that I don't know if I could
Mhm.
eloquently speak to it, but I wanna let's normalize it. It's a thing, and with the soul comment, I mean, yes, like, our hearts were literally handled, like, human hands
Mhm.
were on our hearts, and how our our hearts went on a vacation because they went on the heart and lung
Yeah.
machine, right? So,
Mhm.
it got to go on a little vacation, and I remember when I first got home from heart surgery, we had a dear friend come stay with us, and it was the most amazing act of love for her to come from another state and help for a week, and she's
That's
really
nice.
intuitive and in tune with me. She's known me for, like, a million years, and she said I was very disassociated, and I think that speaks to your clam analogy because I wonder if, like, during surgery when our hearts are put on vacation, AKA stopped, because vacation sounds a lot nicer than
Yep.
stop. I wonder if our soul just kinda disassociates from us a little bit and be like, "Oh,
Mm,
okay, where I was attached isn't exactly beating right now, so I'm just gonna kinda float over
mhm.
here and just kind of follow this body around until I can reintegrate."
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely possible. Yeah,
That feels
for
true.
sure.
I mean, it feels plausible.
It does. Do you feel like you saw your surgery or remember any of it?
No, thank God, no.
No.
Like, literally, thank God I didn't know.
Yeah,
But I do
yeah.
I remember waking up, and that was a real party. I woke up
Waking up where?
well, I woke
In
up
the
in
operating room?
ICU
Oh, I see.
and intubated, and that did not go
Oh.
well. That did not go well.
Oh. Oh,
Mhm.
that's super scary. I
Mhm.
was worried about that. I they got it out before I woke up,
Oh,
but
you lucky duck.
that I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Mhm. Yes,
That probably still gives you nightmares.
I it did for a while. It gave me daymares because I would think about it during the day. And I would be like,
Yeah.
"What?" And it luckily, we are all laughing about it and pretty soon thereafter, but while I was still intubated, I
Mhm.
immediately started having reactions to the anesthesia, and I ended up getting
Ugh.
violently ill. And I was
Ugh.
so afraid I was gonna vomit with still intubated, and then, it'd go into my lungs, and they had my hands tied to the handrails of the bed, and so I'm like this and, like, intubated, and I couldn't say anything, and I knew I was gonna throw up, and so the only
And you're lying down,
and I'm
right?
laying down, and the only thing I could think to do was give them the bird. Like, I kept flipping both my middle fingers at my surgeon, my husband, the nurses, and they just thought I was really pissed because who wouldn't be in this situation? And I just could not think of any other way to let them know I was about to, like, vomit, and I think I gave up. I gave them enough of trouble that they finally were like, "Okay, we'll take it out," and the moment they took it out, it was like it just kept coming, and I threw up 25 times post-sternotomy.
With a broken sternum.
Mhm,
Oh my god.
mhm.
I can't even. I oh my god. I you poor thing. I just can't
It was,
even.
like, next level.
I can't imagine.
I can
No,
still
that is next level. That's horrible.
what is imprinted on my mind still, Lisa, is I can see the clock on the wall of the ICU room, and it's, like, 3 in the morning, and I was just like I just kinda knew when the next wave would hit me because I had been watching the clock, and it was this almost on time. I don't remember the frame now, but I just watching the clock and hearing that tick, tick, it's
Oh my god, how awful.
I
Oh,
love
you
it
poor
because it's how I
thing.
still
That is
cope. It
traumatizing.
was bad, it was bad.
That is super traumatizing. I am so sorry. That's just
It
felt
was
like
bad.
alone with this.
Yeah, and I would, like, just kinda bend my neck enough so I could, like, vomit, but not
Oh,
hurt my sternum. I got it down to, like, a science where
ugh.
where I could still vomit but not upset the
Oh.
sternum. Like, I
Well,
had had
meanwhile,
that
you have
much
nothing in your
practice.
stomach, right?
Well, right, but my body was still, like had to get it out, like, all the anesthesia, and I'm
Right.
blonde and blue-eyed and very light-skinned, and I was told post-surgery, which would have been helpful to know pre-surgery, that blonde, blue-eyed people have a harder time with anesthesia, and I would have really appreciated that education, and there were things they could have done for me prior to the surgery, so those Dramamine tabs that you can put behind your ears, those stickers, they could have done that.
Yeah.
So when I had my 2nd and 3rd surgery,
Oh.
they did that for me and it helped. And then they could have given other medications with the anesthesia to keep the nausea at bay. So in my 2nd and 3rd surgeries combined, the 2 of those combined, I only threw up once. But
Oh my
yeah,
god.
I was pretty disappointed that the anesthesiologist just, taking one look at me would have known that anesthesia wasn't gonna go very well for me. So
Oh my gosh. I have to say, listening to your story, listening to those episodes. I couldn't sleep for a couple of days. I just couldn't believe what you had been through.
Oh
Like,
gosh.
it's
Sorry to
bad enough to go
traumatize
through
you.
it once. No, no, no. It was, it's so instructive, and to hear about other people's experiences,
Mhm.
and everybody's is different, and yeah, but yours is really quite traumatic.
Mm.
There's one last thing I wanted to
Sure.
say was,
Please.
I had spoken to a friend of mine who's a trauma specialist, and I felt like I could remember some of my surgery, and maybe I was floating above my body. I don't know. It might be just some false memory. I don't know how I could possibly remember some of it, my mind playing tricks on me or something. But I called her about that, and she said, "Look, I can't help you for 2 weeks because that particular anesthesia is the most intense anesthesia a human gets, and it takes about 2 weeks. Everybody's different, but it takes about can take up to 2 weeks to leave your body." And she said, "You can't really treat somebody for any mental health stuff while they still have that stuff going on." And she said to me, "People cannot keep the two things in their mind at the same time, one is like a trauma, the thought of the trauma, whatever it is, and gratitude." And she said, "Think of something when you feel traumatized, think of something you're grateful for, but it has to be related to the trauma. It can't be just like grateful for vanilla ice cream. Has to be something related." And at the time, I was so sad I couldn't really think of anything. And she said, "Well, was there a great doctor or a great nurse?" And there was an amazing nurse named Julia who, like, I'll never forget. And so she said, "When you feel traumatized, think about Julia and think about what she did for you and how she made you feel. And you can't hold both of those things in your mind at the same time." And that helped me tremendously. And I still use it to this day if I ever think about something traumatizing or scary, and I use that skill, and I think it's or that mechanism. It just really, really a helpful thing that she taught me.
Wow, that is a really important piece of advice for all of us, no matter where we are in our lives, even when we read the
Exactly.
news.
Exactly. Exactly. You're so right. Exactly.
Eh,
Yeah.
I swear it's like you gotta put on your thunder jacket, that dogs wear, like a thunder coat when you read the
I
news, but
know.
or when you read your medical
It's
reports.
true.
When you go to your medical
Yeah.
portal, put on your little thunder coat, think of something
Yep.
grateful that you can even pay for healthcare.
If you're gonna read that, absolutely, and if you're gonna read your medical report, I suggest not doing it on a Friday afternoon where you're gonna have to wait 2 days to ask those questions.
Also good advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen to that.
No Friday afternoon reading.
Mhm. And if you're feeling anxious about it, like, think about, like, well, what am I actually solving if I do choose to read this on a Friday afternoon? Like, how is that truly
Right.
helping me?
That's right.
And maybe it would be
Yep.
helpful because maybe it's all good news and you're like, "Oh, you're gonna live forever." But, like, usually it's just
They
not
never said
helpful.
that. No. No, they list all the problems,
Mhm,
and, we read them, we only understand, unless we're trained medical people, the bits and pieces of it, and not how it all works together, so it's very alarming.
mhm.
Just if you're having open heart surgery, you have a big problem.
It's just so easy these days to doom scroll and to quickly type in all
Yes.
your symptoms, and usually Mayo
Mhm.
Clinic is gonna come up first because they are just, like,
Yep.
dominating the search engine optimization game, but
Mhm.
it's easy to diagnose yourself with all kinds of horrible diseases that are gonna cause all of your limbs
Yeah,
to fall off and your eyeballs to pop out.
that's right. You can't even use eye drops now,
You're
so you
oh, dear. Well, but it's like there's this fine line of being curious where when you cross over it, you dysregulate yourself and all of those around you. And so
Right.
I have really for myself, had to get I had to build the wisdom up, the wisdom muscles to know when I could tolerate doing some research and when I couldn't. And
Yeah.
I think your
Y
advice of, like, not looking at something on a Friday, especially in the afternoon, is so brilliant.
Mhm.
Like, you nailed that. But just check in with yourself on any day of the week and like, hey, can my nervous system actually tolerate,
Right.
me having whatever? Like it just that takes an extra level of wisdom and takes a few more seconds of your day to be like, no, this isn't going to serve me right now. I can put off knowing I have, leukemia or some heart issue for 5 more days. Because guess what? You don't have to think about it until your next appointment. What a brilliant
That's
thing.
right.
Be in the present moment.
Yeah. We all lose too much sleep over our health difficulties because all of us who are either listening to this or
Mhm.
going to be on in the future or going through this in the future, we have a lot to deal with, and why add to your plate? I'm not saying be ignorant about your situation, but I think that the best thing to do is read it the day before, the day you're going to see your doctor, because then you can write your list of questions down. What does this mean?
Mhm.
Why did it say this? And you know, I that's how I do it because I just don't want to get myself all worked up, perhaps over nothing.
That's sage advice right there. Mhm.
Thank you.
And if you're all worked up going into your doctor's appointment, then you have a hard time listening because your nervous system is so overactivated. I just don't think we talk
Right.
about the nervous system enough in our society,
It's
and
true.
that is so key to healing well, right? Like, really thriving after a heart surgery. It's like really getting in touch with yourself, getting reintegrated with your soul, opening that clam back
Mhm.
up, as you were saying, right?
Mhm.
And just
Mhm.
really getting crystal clear on what your body is trying to tell you. And you knew
Right.
5 years prior that your body was saying, something is not working right here." And you kept pursuing. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways today is just keep when you know that something isn't right. You are the chief executive officer of your own body. You are hiring a doctor, you're actually paying for their services to help you find out what is wrong. And if you don't feel like you are with the right doctor, or if you feel like they aren't listening, or that you need to go to a more specialized place, do it.
Yeah.
And that is okay.
It's very easy. It's easy to start believing them when they start telling you that either there's nothing wrong with you or that you're too anxious or you're crazy or you're too stressed out or whatever it is they're trying to tell you. In a way, you want to believe it because it means that there's nothing wrong. Everyone wants to hear that, whatever, you're actually fine. So you kind of want to believe it. And then I think for women especially, you start to think like, gosh, maybe they're right. Maybe I am too stressed. Maybe it's I think you have to be very strict with yourself not to let yourself get talked into that narrative because you do know something's wrong, right?
Yep.
It's just I feel like you have to be strict with yourself and not beat yourself up, that it's not your fault and you aren't bringing this on yourself. And I feel like the recovery has been a lot about that, not just physically, but about the forgiving yourself of these mistakes you made along the way, which was to say like, "Oh, okay, maybe she's right. Maybe, you know," and to forgive the people who misdiagnose you as well. I feel like most of the time they're doing the best that they can, and sometimes they're over their heads. And I just wish that they would say that instead of just say, "I really don't know. I'm really sorry. I don't know. I'm gonna push. You here. Try this person," instead of saying, "Well, maybe you should calm down."
Right. Well, why don't we leave it right there for today, Lisa? I appreciate your time. I appreciate your courage. It's a
Thank
lot to
you.
come onto a podcast and speak into the ethers, but I know your story is going to help a lot of people and women especially. So thank you for your time today.
I hope so. Your story helped me, so thank you so much.
And that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your day with me. If you enjoyed this podcast, I sure would appreciate if you would go to my website, theheartchamberpodcast.com, and make a donation. Also, if you are a fellow heart warrior, I'd love to hear from you. Would you like to share your story on this podcast? You can either send me an email at boots@theheartchamberpodcast.com, or you can go to my website and go to the contact link and leave me a message there. There's also a way to leave me a voicemail on my website. I'm so glad you joined me for today. Please be sure to come back next Tuesday to the Heart Chamber podcast for another inspiring episode.